as women in this work who've been doing it for a long time. And as Ruth and Elspeth were sharing something together, I was observing and thinking, what a great thing it would be to be able to share this with all of you. Because I really feel like more and more like dialogue is where things really come alive, right? I mean, we can go and present things and that's valuable. But when we dialogue about the material, we're in this incredible kind of interaction together and a way of really co-regulating. And I think a lot of richness and excitement comes from those very fresh and spontaneous interactions that happen live. So we're going to take a little bit of time, each of us, to talk about what it is that really is at the heart of what we do and what we believe and have passion about in terms of the work that we've been doing for altogether probably close to 100 years if we combine all our decades of experience, which is pretty amazing. So I want to start us with a practice that we always do in an embodied dialogue. We're not just talking up here. We are also connecting down into the felt sense of the experience we're having. And we're taking the concepts that we're thinking about and we're bringing them down into a sense of embodiment so that all of us is experiencing what we're thinking and feeling and carrying in terms of what's important to us. So I'm going to start and then I'll hand it over. And maybe, Rashawn, can you spotlight the three of us? I'm on my laptop and they've got these tiny little squares. I can hardly see you guys, but it's much better with, okay, there's me and Ruth and Elspeth. Great. Okay. So let's start. This is a beautiful practice that Jean Gendlin, who is one of my major teachers and the father of the felt sense, he wrote this beautiful piece called The Primacy of Human Presence. And this really is, when I was thinking about, what is the essence of what I think is important, the most important piece of the work that we do, it really does boil down for me to the capacity to really be present, both with ourselves and with the people that we're working with and helping, and also just in our lives as human beings. And so Gendlin wrote this beautiful piece that I've turned into a kind of practice, and I'm just going to put it into my own words and make it really simple for us. So you can decide whether you would like to just bring attention to something around you in the room. And just kind of start there by pausing. So a lot of what we do in our focusing practice starts with the pause. It starts with the capacity to be silent and to notice what's going on in that kind of quiet place that each of us has somewhere inside. And then if it feels right for you, you could soften your gaze. And then just slowly inviting your attention somewhere down into the center of your body. And only if it feels right for you. Otherwise, you can just keep awareness with something in the room that helps you to slow things down. So in this wonderful practice, the primacy of human presence, Gendlin asks us to put to the side two big parts of experiencing to be able to help us clear some space inside the body. So the first piece is to ask yourself, would it be possible, just for now, to clear and put to the side everything I've been taught about how to be, how to think about, how to understand another person's experience in the work that we do. So all the theories, the DBTs and the CBTs, and somatic experiencing and focusing oriented therapy and felt sense polyvagal model and a psychoanalysis, all the things, diagnostic categories that we have learned, and just for now, to make a space and put them beside you, over on one side. And that can be really challenging. Just to put them over there on the one side for now. And then with more kind of openness in the center of your body, see if it would be possible to put all of your stuff, your lived experience in this moment. Your joys, your sorrows, your fears, the worry about the conflict you just had with somebody, all of those important aspects of your own lived experience. And just for now, to put those on the other side. We're not dismissing them, but we're just asking them gently, just for now, to clear out and come to the other side of us, just beside. And then as we bring attention into the center without all of that noise, there's just us, just this me inside, fresh and open to really listening deeply to another person's experiencing, without any judgment, without any categories or diagnostic formulations, or without the clouding of our own stuff, our worries and triggers, just to be with another human being. And to really welcome the freshness inside us and whatever it is that this other person brings to us. And Gendlin calls this place inside this shaky being. So here I am inside me, this shaky being, and I'm allowing myself to be vulnerable to this other shaky being. And you may also just notice what it feels like physically in your body to be in this space that feels somewhat clear, doesn't have to be perfect. It's just a reminder to be a human being with another human being. And his Gendlin says, this seems to me to be really the most important thing. And you might find a handle for this place inside. The third step of focusing, a word or maybe an image comes. Or maybe a gesture in your body that helps you to remember this place, this fresh, open, authentic, vulnerable place that has a kind of a quality of strength And you might want to remember this handle, to write it down or to draw it, so that you can find this place again. When you really want to be able to listen to another person. And so when you're ready, just slowly and gently bring your awareness back to the room and back to our group. Here we all are together. The primacy of human presence. Isn't that gorgeous? That's Gendlin. Yeah. And it takes a lot of courage, right? For us, all the things we know and we've learned and to just be able to put that aside and put our own stuff aside. Very, challenging, right? So, Ruth and Elspeth, let's share a little bit about, where we were last when we were together and sitting together, sharing a meal, and we really got excited and sharing a lot about years of working in areas that cross, right? So who would like to start?
Chocolate cake.
Chocolate cake. Yeah. Yeah, something really lovely happened there, right? It was like a moment of being light and playful and co-regulating, I think. Yeah. So Elspeth, I know you to be a pretty a maverick in your field, I would say. Would you agree?
I have no idea, Jen. I am who I am, and the observation is fascinating to me, and it's both welcomed as well as, oh dear.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about you and the work that you have done and that you are doing, because it really is, it's wonderful work.
Well, I think the practice that you've just done, I mean, that was really beautiful, because it touches very much on the work I'm doing, which is essentially with people who are non-verbal or have no verbal language. So these are individuals, mostly adults at this point, with developmental disabilities. And I mean, you've used the word passion on several occasions, and I really find it hard to know how to respond to passion. And I was thinking about this, and I think the best I can do at this point is to observe myself over the years and where I am now. And I think how I would describe it is kind of compelled to be a voice. And I don't mean a voice that is verbal words. I mean, in my actions, a kind of a voice to support people who often get left out of the space because they do not have a verbal voice.
Yeah.
And they get marginalized, and they get traumatized, and they get stigmatized, and they even hate crimes and abuse and trauma, physical, emotional, sexual. I mean, it's huge in the population I work with, adults with developmental disabilities, absolutely huge, but it's unrecognized. And what we see instead are their way of behaving in the absence of a voice, which is through behaviors.
Yeah.
And when you communicate your behaviors of distress, I mean, what I with my team have been discovering recently, I mean, the light has gone on, and it's it's taken a long time to go on, but I think polyvagal theory has been very helpful in identifying our flight, flight, freeze, and shutdown behaviors.
Yeah.
And what I've been recognizing is that the behaviors that are, people referred to me with behavior problems, often called challenging behaviors. I like to say challenging services, because behavior is co-constructed. But I think what we see is these behaviors that get interventions like medication and physical restraint are actually communications of distress, emotional distress. And that's the bit that I've been trying to promote and articulate within my kind of professional circle. I'm a psychiatrist and a psychotherapist, and that's what I've been trying to do. And it's not easy, but it's, you know, it's so obvious to me now, so terribly obvious. So just makes sense. It just all fits together. And that's what I've been doing in the past few years, particularly as I have become more alert to trauma. And no doubt it relates to my own experiences in the past, which essentially were periods of being in hospital with, you know, painful medical procedures and being intermittently deaf for the first 7 or 8 years of my life. So I relied on looking at people's mouths and looking at their body language to understand what was happening. And I think that's how I probably gravitated into this area. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? How we all have our story about how we ended up where we are. Yeah. So just briefly, Elspeth, can you describe what is it that now traditionally happens in the psychiatric system, and what is it that you're proposing as a change?
Well, what happens is people, I mean, some of these behaviors are very, very distressing. I mean, you know, people are literally hitting themselves, cutting themselves, banging their heads against brick walls, literally.
Yeah.
You know, punching at their faces and causing retinal detachment and blindness. It's huge. And when we see this as care providers, we actually kind of panic inside, I think. We don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And we see it as a behavior. It's sometimes kind of conceptualized explicitly or implicitly, but it's a disorder, a behavior disorder. And the co-construction of these circumstances is not always recognized. And I think the one thing that comes to my mind is the concept of safety, but the felt sense of safety. And I think what I've been trying to communicate is that many of these behaviors arise where people feel unsafe. And that's unsafe, perhaps because of medical issues, perhaps because of the environmental issues, like, you know, maybe someone with autism, with all these things going on, the signs, the visual, overwhelming. Environments are overwhelming, but not infrequently it's because of that dialogue, that interpersonal dialogue of not understanding the communication, and then the people feeling that, a deep felt sense of being left out, being shamed, being humiliated, and all that dynamic kind of contributes to these behaviors. So it's trying to help people understand that. And we've developed a formulation or a kind of a model within which to evaluate the behaviors. It's kind of called HELP, H-E-L-P, you know, health, look at the health issues, look at the environmental issues, look at the lived experience, because trauma is in the background and has barely been recognized, often not recognized, even by my colleagues in psychiatry.
Yeah.
And most often, why the people are referred to the psychiatrist to do something with these behaviors. It's not, you know, as a psychiatrist, about 80% of the issues are not about the needing a psychiatrist so much as understanding the context.
Yes, yeah.
So I don't
And
know.
I've heard you speak about your absolute distress at how those behaviors are treated sometimes in residential settings, in hospital settings, where people are restrained and given heavy doses of meds and isolated, and how distressing that is for you. And that's where I really see what I call passion in you, that you want so deeply to, you see the injustice of this.
Yeah, the injustices are absolutely huge. You know, it kind of, you know, it's, as you say, it breaks my heart when I see it. And a very simple, perhaps, example of this is in 1950s or so, people born with Down syndrome, for example, the families would automatically be suggested to them that they might go into an institution. Now that, and in 1947, the life span of person with Down syndrome was before adolescence. They tended to die before that time. Now it's about 81, 80, 60, 70, 80s. But I think going into an institution as a little wee baby, we contributed to the disability.
Yeah.
We contributed to the isolation, the absence of primary care provision that's predictable, that's loving, that's caring, that's wrapping your arms around the individual. You know, and we're doing that right now, but in a different way. You know, we're seeing these behaviors, and people are then put into more restrictive environments, maybe medicated, maybe very strict behavioral support. That's kind of positive behavior support is different. I'm talking more about being physically restrained, actually. So we're actually contributing to the dysregulation, the fight, flight, freeze, survival responses. And it's so in healthcare systems and social care systems, we are causing harm.
Yes, and
And we
this
have,
is where I think it's important for us to be bold and to speak up and to say these things. So
yeah,
thank you for that.
yeah.
All right. It's a
Deep
little
breath.
piece, beautiful piece from Elspeth. Yeah. And Ruth.
Yeah, I'm very passionate about working with severely traumatized individuals with high levels of dissociation. Often they're the highest users of our mental health care system. And I think there's a lot of similarities here with what you talked about, Elspeth.
Yeah.
And when I think about my patients, they have a physical voice, but often they have no psychological voice, right? They've always been suppressed, and they feel they don't deserve to be here. They don't deserve to be human in many cases, and they don't deserve to speak, and they don't deserve to have needs. And so in the system, often they've had a lot of difficulties. Mental illness is an invisible injury, right? We can't see it. So I think it's very hard for a lot of healthcare professionals to be as compassionate as they can be. And often these individuals also get labeled through different behaviors they engage in, right? And often these behaviors can be difficult, especially if we don't understand the context, right? So for example, severe self-harm.
Yes.
Sometimes almost seeming that, traumatized individuals engage in behaviors so they are restrained. And so often, we feel very helpless.
Mm-hmm.
And when we feel helpless, it's easy to get angry and frustrated.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
take that out on these individuals. And I'm thinking back to one of my clients who, when she was in foster care and frequently admitted into the psychiatric system, she subconsciously, of course, would engage in these behaviors that led to her being restrained. And now, as we're working through in therapy and as she's really healing, she's looking back, with the capacity to observe what she engaged in the past. And she's talking about and figuring out why she got into these situations where she was repeatedly restrained.
Mm-hmm.
She's figuring out that this was partially because she didn't feel like she had boundaries around her body. So she didn't realize where she began and where she ended, which I think is an intolerable feeling. And so by being restrained, this is a
Contained.
yeah, her body was seeking to actually start feeling, oh, this is where I begin and this is where I end.
Mm-hmm.
But also she was longing to be touched in a non-vulnerable way. And, soothing touch would have been far too frightening for her.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, subconsciously, she was seeking a way of being touched, the beginnings of being able to tolerate being touched, because she was never touched growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we had understood these contexts and why she was doing this, right, we would have dealt with her very differently, right? We wouldn't have restrained her. Not that I restrained her, but the system, I don't think, would have done that, right? And so it's helping us understand context, like you were talking about, Elspeth, understanding why our clients are engaging in certain behaviors, right? Really, I think, becoming aware of how deep their suffering is. Right? They're not doing this to manipulate us. Their suffering is incredible, right? And we have to understand the context, why they're doing certain behaviors and why they're engaging in certain activities.
Yeah.
Here, my group and I have been very interested in understanding what happens in the brain in traumatized individuals. Really making the invisible injury visible and showing to people, this is, you're not making this up. We can see this. And it's amazing how validating this has been for individuals to actually be able to visualize, wow, the way my brain fires is very different. And this is how my brain adapted to inescapable threat, to constant trauma.
Yeah.
And now we're trying to get to safety, right? We're trying to adapt that brain to safety. But often those brains don't know safety yet. Brains and bodies, of course, they're connected, right? How can we shift that individuals to being able to tolerate safety at a dose that they feel comfortable with? And then how does that change their brains, right? How can we harness the malleability of the brain or the neuroplasticity of the brain to change that brain towards healing?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's been the journey my team and I have been on.
Yeah.
And we've all been on, right?
Yeah. As we're speaking, right, it's so clear that all of us, and I could really hear this in Judith Herman's work, and early in trauma and recovery, how noticing how, especially women in the psychiatric system, were so treated with contempt in terms of not understanding these self-harming behaviors. And I think we're all speaking about that. We're saying we need to understand the context. We need to understand more about how bodies work, including brains, right? And how the nervous system works. It was Judith Herman way back who said, people begin to understand, survivors begin to understand that if they inflict sudden jolts to the body, it activates a shift in the nervous system. And so all of this we can bring together and begin to really challenge, right, the paradigm, and ask people to be open to put to the side some of your preconceived ideas about people being manipulative, or that was the big one, I think, right, that wanting attention, right? Well, they needed attention.
Yeah, and sometimes they need attention, right? Because they've never seen or heard growing up. So often they have to take extreme means to get attention, right? And sometimes that repeats itself. But again, we need to understand that, right?
Yeah.
Why is somebody taking such extreme means to be seen, right? And then to work with them that now in the present, that's not necessary anymore. I see you, I hear you, and I'm here with you, right?
Yeah.
And we don't have to repeat the past.
So how, well, we say, well, how are we helping to get this message out? Well, here's one way, right? What we're doing right now, right? We're having this dialogue together about what we are understanding over a long period of time of doing this work with people that are behaving in ways that really, I think, bottom line, scare people, right? They scare people, especially if you're a helper. And so how can we continue this dialogue and keep moving forward? Because it's a journey, right? And it's, how do we manage ourselves working in institutions? I don't think, well, Elspeth and I don't work in institutions anymore, really. And Ruth, you left inpatient work, right? You're really now in your laboratory. We have to survive too, and it's hard to do that when we're surrounded with these paradigms that don't understand.
I think, Jen, we have left the institutions as buildings, but the institutions are now in the community, and not least in the framework of our service systems.
Yes.
Yeah. The individuals I work with, there's a very high prevalence of horrible things happening within services.
Yeah.
And it's somehow trying to get to organizational levels.
Yes.
Not just ourselves on the front line, you can go so far, but it's actually, you know, the concept of trauma-informed care,
Yeah.
certainly across institutions and across services and ministries, I think, right up, you know, from the board level right down to the ground.
Yeah.
We have to get certainly the concept of safety, but
Yes.
it's
Yes.
felt sense of safety. It's not just that there's no tripping on the carpets or no falling over the balconies, but it's actually,
Or building more walls between
or
countries.
building more walls, exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, there is now, I understand, in there's a kind of an ethical concept of safety in the cultural context. I understand from a colleague that I was working with.
Yeah.
And it's certainly in my area, I think we have to see the felt sense of safety is important. So we're shifting the power dynamic from the service that says this is safe, this is safe, this is safe, to really finding a way to invite the input of the person as to how they feel safe. And
Yes.
when you aren't able to articulate that with words, we actually have to engage emotionally with the person with no words. And that does require, I mean, that's why I love the practice you've just done today, because going into a room with someone that you've heard about, they're almost created as, I mean, they're created as scary people because they have been engaged in self-injurious behavior as well as injury to the environment. So you're
Yes.
going into a room where this person now has a history.
Yeah.
And somehow you have to, before you go in, as your hand is on the knob of the door, you're finding ways to self-regulate yourself. So you're coming from a space that's not going in with all the jargon in our heads, but you're actually going in with a non-verbal sense of being present.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
I think when you don't have a very major sensory input, say like hearing or even able to speak, you develop other sensory sensitivities more exquisitively.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
certainly in my area, I'm probably working with individuals whose brains have adapted to some of the sensory things they're not able to perceive, and they have adapted to reading maybe non-verbal cues, or adapted even their olfactory sense, because you can pick up anxiety, you can smell anxiety in someone else.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
we have to be mindful that we have to be authentically present and
Yes.
grounded ourselves in order to offer that safe enough space for the other individual to come down from their dysregulated state. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I think that's what what I felt and I was drawn to with both of you, was the capacity to be able to do that, you know, to really be, and with Ruth too, you know, to really have that sense that you're willing to really listen and to be in there with this person who's suffering. And, you know, that I think unfortunately is somewhat rare because it hurts us too, right? It's hard to carry. We can definitely develop vicarious trauma.
But I
Okay,
think if we're
Ruth.
compassionate, and people often say to me, I can't do anything in the emerge. What can I do for this person? I say, you can do a lot.
Yeah.
If you see and hear a person and you're with them in the emergency department, even if you only see them for half an hour, that may be the first time in an individual's life where somebody has seen and heard them and really been attuned to them. And that can make a huge difference. And so to really empower, right, both the client, but also the therapists that are sometimes working in very difficult circumstances, as we've talked about, I think we need to empower both parties, right, and bring hope, and also to be aware that, often people think if I'm compassionate, I'm going to burn out. No, the data are very different. The more compassionate we are, the less we burn out.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely. And this is so important, right? For us to, because I think young therapists coming in, they don't know that. They don't know these things. So that's why I want us to keep talking and doing this work and sharing and spreading this, because it's so important to understand that when you do really good work, you don't burn out.
Oh.
Yeah.
You've just triggered, I'm getting back this energy again. I don't see the chocolate cake, but I'm getting back the energy.
Yeah.
So just kind of bouncing off what you said, Ruth, it's kind of, in a sense, it's not how we're managing the person in the emergency room. It's actually how we are managing ourselves first.
Yeah.
And if we can do that bit, the other person will feel that from us. But I think, you know, emergency rooms are very demanding places. I
Yeah.
haven't been in one for a long time, but even in the chronic sessions that I'm with, you know, you're still taken into what do I do? How can I manage? Or how can I support? And really, if we can find a way to manage those feelings in ourselves and clear space, it's already, I think, bringing an ambience or a milieu to the space, which is helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I did that work way back. First job I had, I worked in Emerge. Was incredible. Yeah.
But that's what we need, right?
Yeah.
We need passion, and we need to, you know, really decrease the dehumanization that we're experiencing, right? In our healthcare system, right?
Yes, we really, really do. So let's keep doing it.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's open it up. So let's stop spotlighting so that we can come back to our group. Rashawn, can you do that for us? And there we go. And here we are. All right. So please feel free to share, talk to us, comments, questions, or maybe what's in the chat. How are you feeling about what we're saying? Ah, Eric. Hello, Eric.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Um, just in response to, I think it was Ruth was talking about, you know, that half an hour might be the first half an hour that someone is sort of showing up, you know, for that other person. And I just recall at some point Jean Gendlin being asked, like, talking to someone at a conference or something, you know, a workshop, whatever, that the person was saying in regard to partnered focusing, the person was expressing some kind of a little bit of anxiety about, you know, it seems to be very complex, you know, because that was her experience in the moment, and she was nervous, thinking, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do this, and remembering all these things, and oh my goodness, you know. And Gendlin says, you know what? Let me tell you, I'm Jean Gendlin. Okay, sometimes it surprises me, but I'm supposed to know what's going on here. I got one thing to say. If you show up, you're doing it.
Yeah.
And and you know, and I also think that this is an experience I can say for myself that that it was new for me relatively late in life. I didn't even know what showing up and experiencing the presence of another person and kind of looping them into, you know, like that listening as I speak kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's this felt sense that we seem to, at least some of us on the call, have a handle on. I think I have some handle on. I didn't know what it was. I didn't grow up with it. It was like an eighth sense that I never developed or something, you know. So I understand how we develop systems in absence of an awareness of this experience, because a lot of people have never actually had it.
Or we have it, and then our particularly Western society knocks it right out of us very early on, right? So
sure.
Yeah.
So, you know, so it's anyway,
it's a beautiful
throw that in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is absolutely what Jean, well, that's what he said, right? That's the primacy of human presence.
Yes.
Just be there with another person. And he says, if they happen to look into my eyes, they might see that I'm just a shaky being, and I have to tolerate that, right? So that's the other piece, is that we're often taught as professionals not to show that vulnerability. It doesn't mean we don't have boundaries or we fall apart, but you can see in Elspeth and in Ruth, and I hope in me, there's an openness to receiving. There's a vulnerability with strength in our presence, right? And that's what, and I think, allows other people it's an invitation to come into that presence and to feel safe enough that you'll be held there. Neil. Hello, Neil.
Hi. Hi.
Hi.
So here's the paradox and the vicious circle. So as we allow and we presence with my clients, but then what happens is then we're increasing the threshold when safety is then felt and registered as danger. Then folks with other colleagues I work with a sense of danger. And then what we have are both sides of the equation where we're in a locked state. So what I see is behaviors increasing. So as a client increases a sense of safety through a felt presence, then those signals are then registered as danger at a certain point, and very often rather quickly. So how do we titrate that in a sense where both sides, both myself, other colleagues, don't feel that sense of defense, and the patient doesn't feel, or the client doesn't feel that sense of defense? So we're talking about neural feedback loops, and we're talking about neural feedback loops on both sides, both on the patient and both on the client side.
Ruth,
So I think I just want to add, so I think then I'm thinking of a particular child I work with, then there's a rush, there's immediate, we have to increase the medication. No, you don't, because what the child is experiencing is an increased a sense of safety and presencing, perhaps for the first time. You know.
Ruth, do you want to respond to that?
Sure. I think you bring up a key thing, Neil, which is everything needs to be dosed really well in trauma treatment, right? And it also makes me think of Rick Clough's statement, the slower you go, the faster you go, right?
Yeah.
And so if that brain and body doesn't know safety yet, we can't throw it into full safety, right? It's not going to tolerate it. So we have to go in tiny, tiny steps and check back with the person. How does that feel for you? And not make the assumption, oh, well, this is safe, so it must feel good. So we check back, right? So we create that dialogue and, we figure out, what is the right dose at which particular point in therapy.
And I just want to add that I think it's necessary to allow, because I think the real healing, if you will, happens in the co-repair. So it has to, feel a sense of safety, the child or whomever feels it, but then we have to allow for that breaking and hold that space. And even exploit and encourage incipiently a break in that connection, so then we could together co-repair it. So it's in that co-repair that the resiliency, the embodiment and the resiliency happens. So all this is beneath the words, right?
Yeah,
so,
increasing of that trust through rupture and repair. Right?
Rupture, right, and co-repair. Where we have co-repair.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. It's so wonderful when that happens, because you can see that then the relationship strengthens, right? So beautiful. Thank you, Neil. Carol, you had your hand up?
Yes, this is my second time I've been able to participate. And I just love what you're doing. And I live in a small town, northern Indiana in the States. And it's lovely to be taken out of the cadence of custom and to be around people that see the connection and the felt safety is so important. I don't get that in my colleagues very often. And it's so, I guess I just wanted to iterate how thankful I am. And I know I represent other people that if we don't have access to the Jan Winhalls and the Ruth Laniuses and the people, the faces here, the expertise, we really struggle. And it's about that whole systemic change and that shift of consciousness. And I'm just feeling this incredible gratitude of being here and being reminded of this presence, because I'm going through a transition myself in that I've taken on a position over at 𝘞𝘪𝘵, and it's going to be a big shift of client kind of focus and going from private practice to back into working in an organization. And I worry that I'm going to lose that ability to be authentic and present. But I also feel like if I'm here,
Yes.
I can bring it there.
Yes, Carol, that's exactly the idea here, is that we build community and we keep reaching out to each other, and we don't make ourselves special or fancy, that you can receive the same kind of support from anybody here in terms of what you need. And we all need it. You know, I need it too. When I'm going out there and talking to people, I need the support of, I was just saying this yesterday in the supervision group, to know that you guys are behind me. Somebody has my back when I start talking about things that other people are like, what is she talking about? Understanding these self-harming behaviors as adaptive? Is she crazy? So, yes, we need each other, and we really, really, everybody needs community. And I think that's definitely one of the things that we need to really factor in going forward. We take this work and we help each other to feel bold, to feel the courage to speak about these things. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like being present in the truth as much as present with our client.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank
So
you. Thank you so much for putting all of this together, and for those that are here for taking the time.
If I could just comment, Jen?
yes, Elspeth. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Carol. Just to resonate with what you're saying, this is also my oxygen. You know, these communities are my oxygen as well. Without it, you begin to cough and splutter and asphyxiate, you know. So this is good oxygen. Yeah.
Yeah.
We all need it, right?
All needed.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the full embodiment of experience, right?
And I think the other side of that is the well-worn analogy of you have to also put on your own mask first before you can help others. It's so important about your own self-care and, you know, close connections and so on. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, I'm watching our time. We've got a bit of time. So Jude, hello.
Hi there. Thanks. It's my first time here, and it's been very lovely and inspiring. And so thanks for all that you've said so far. I suppose that just one of the things that came to mind when I was listening to Elspeth talking about the authenticity of presence, and then Ruth talking about the dehumanization of trauma survivors. I suppose is that in that sense of presence, that it's so important not to do any othering of those who have survived trauma. And also just a real game changer for me, I think, and it just came to mind, so I'll share it, is that so those who have survived a lot of trauma can often be really scared of kindness and of goodness. And there was a little bit of talking about how that needs to be tolerated. And also just that that sense of you know, and I speak from I speak both about this and from this place. So that sense of being tricked or betrayed or lured by kindness and by goodness and by apparent safety, and then that changing very suddenly. And so, and then just that, you know, most trauma survivors that I know can spot a fake a mile away.
Yeah.
And if they get any sense that you do not see them as a resourceful, adaptive, creative human being, then they're not interested in anything you have to offer, and rightly so. And so, yeah, so that's all I have to say, really. Just very admiring of suspicion in people myself. Quite suspicious as a person. So, yeah, so that's all I have to say. Thanks for what you're doing.
Yeah, it's wonderful, and really, really important points that we, especially when we've been really hurt, we're highly attuned to what really is going on and what are the kind of underlying intentions. And it's hard to trust.
If I could add to that, maybe, Jen, thank
Sure,
you.
Elspeth.
Thank you, Jude. I mean, I agree. The experience of trauma makes it hard to trust. I think it also sensitizes you to inauthenticity. You know, I think we develop other senses. Those non-verbal senses are smell, touch, vision, and so on. We can pick it up. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Hello, Rebecca. Saw you yesterday. How are you?
Hello, good to see you again, Jan. Hi, everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as you were saying, Jan, this is everything that I didn't learn in grad school.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like so life-changing for me because, well, ironically, that's when I learned about polyvagal theory. It just spoke to me as a person, as a complex trauma survivor and a helper. And, this week I've really struggled with, clients who are very, very dysregulated and just have a hard time receiving solutions or feedback or guidance. And it really put things in perspective for me, just hearing you speak now, that some clients are so identified with their pain that it can be really scary to let go and envision a life where they feel safe in their bodies and their relationships. And so, really noticing myself feeling frustrated with myself, with them, and just going from, well, this is helping, maybe that's exactly what's needed, is to just be here with them in this moment, in their suffering. And also something that I heard once, people that are hardest to love are the ones that need it the most. It really resonated.
Yeah.
Reminded me of that. So
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this.
Ruth, did you want to comment on that at all? I love this stuff you're doing on the default mode network. And I think it relates to some of what Rebecca's talking about, the ways that we can behave that seem crazy. And yet, with the work that you're doing in terms of understanding the brain and how people are responding based on trauma, right?
Absolutely. And I think, often individuals who need the most love have the most difficulty receiving it. I think that's so important, right? And yeah, I think there is a brain correlate of that. We can actually understand that in the brain, because how we see ourselves in trauma becomes hijacked by the deep survival brain that carries trauma-related arousal and raw emotion. And so that becomes coupled with who we are, right? And we see ourselves as bad and defective and not deserving to be loved, right? And so how do we uncouple that very slowly, that hijacking, right, of the trauma-related arousal and raw emotion from how we see ourselves, right? That's a process, and that doesn't occur quickly. But I think once we're able to uncouple that, very slowly, again, dosing it very, very slowly, then slowly we start feeling deserving of self-compassion. Very, very slowly. And I think that's one of the most difficult things in trauma treatment, right? Is to bring that self-compassion online. And here I just want to share just a little bit of a study with Bethany Brand and 𝗏𝗏 𝗧𝐿𝗂𝗃. We're developing a program called Finding Solid Ground, which we've tested around the world on the most dissociative and traumatized individuals who would never make it into a study normally. And we were able to recruit these individuals internationally. They felt part of a community, and we learned from each other, and we worked towards healing. And when I first started seeing the data and I saw there was an increase in self-compassion, I thought, wow, we've got something here. That's so hard to get online. And so I think that's what you're speaking to, Rebecca, and it's so at the core of trauma therapy and healing. So thank you so much for bringing that up.
Wow. Can we read about this project?
Absolutely. You can go to Bethany Brand's website on.
Oh, yes, I remember her. Yeah.
It's called Finding Solid Ground. That's the program, the treatment program.
Mhm.
And the study is called the TOP-DD study.
Wonderful. So, boy, I want to thank you. We're running out of time, Ruth and Elspeth, for coming. I'm really excited because on Ruth's recommendation, all of us are, well, Ruth is teaching and Elspeth and I are taking the deep brain reorienting training in November in Toronto. So maybe some of you will join us, and I think it's booked up now. But such incredible work, and you can see the richness when we all come together and there's a common theme, and yet we've worked on these areas in different ways. So let's just keep going. We've got a space here in Embodied Dialogues. We can keep going with this kind of exploration and support, right? Real support for each other in this work that we're doing, which is so wonderful. It really is so wonderful. And so thank you all for being with us. And thank you so much, Elspeth and Ruth, for taking the time to come and be with us. And I think, Rashawn, September, the end of the month, we have 𝗓𝗏𝗧𝗏 coming from the UK, and we're going to explore more around trauma and addiction. So be well and safe, and we'll see you soon. Thanks so much, Ruth and Elspeth.
Thank you.
See you
Thank you,
in
everyone.
November.
Again.